In Brawl Stars, we tend to focus on the top of the top. Everyone complains about the S tier brawlers, the buffed brawlers, the new broken brawlers, but what about the F tier brawlers? No, not even. What about the brawlers that once dominated, or at least were some of the most dominant forces in the game? Brawlers that had a real and tangible niche in the meta, and then lost it. And I'm not talking about lost it as in being bad for a season or two, I'm talking about a real consistent drop off. That is the topic of this video, where I'll be taking a look at the 10 biggest falloffs in Brawl Stars history. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to keep up with my videos. Second, join our Discord server, we have some fun stuff to do there. And third, consider becoming a channel member if you're interested in supporting out the channel and have ample disposable income for some cool perks like watching videos early or getting to decide on future video ideas. Finally, if you like the music in the video, it's all made by me, so check out my second channel if you're curious for more music. First, let's define what we mean as a falloff. What I'm defining it as is a brawler that was once at the top of the meta, being an A or S tier brawler. Then, due to one way or another, they became consistently bad for a long time, losing their niche spot in the meta. Sure, they're able to have gotten it again at some point, like with a hyper, buffy, or a big buff. But for at least a few months to even years, they should have been a consistently bad brawler without a real niche. Obviously, this is very subjective, so you might disagree with some of my picks and have some of your own, so feel free to leave them in the comments because I'm sure I probably forgot about some falloffs. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get to the video. At number 10, Jacky. Jacky's been doing quite bad for a while. She's a brawler that's been sort of a relic of an older time, without the huge amount of damage that we're seeing today. And as a brawler without a super reliable movement tool other than a gadget, Jacky's being outclassed. However, it wasn't always this way. With the release of Jacky's hypercharge, and literally nothing else, Jacky went from a D to an A tier or nearly even S tier brawler, becoming one of the best and most dangerous brawlers in the game. Her hypercharge was one of the best in the game at the time, especially considering not many hypers had been released to that point, and considering the very useful slow it gave. One of Jacky's biggest problems was getting to enemies, and this hyper solved that problem for her. However, things didn't stay up for Jacky for long. She slowly fell down the meta as more and more hypers were released, and the game turned into an increasingly aggro, burst-based game which Jacky was weak against. Furthermore, she got a nerf to her hypercharge, which was one of the only things keeping her afloat in the meta. Somehow, she still managed to stay near the C and B tier for a while, but a mystifying nerf to her health and the drop of buffies have led to Jacky probably being the worst tank in the game right now, and absolutely useless in this new meta. At number 9, we got Lumi. Her falloff is actually quite different than Jacky's. On release, she was utterly insane. Her control abilities were incredible, with a broken gadget that acted like a Lu super. Her attack projectile speed was also insane, and she had way too much health for the controller damage dealer hybrid she was. And well, she was strong for a while. A combination of a lack of real nerfs and a broken hypercharge release led to her to stay at the top of the meta for quite a while. However, a while isn't forever. Eventually, the constant nerf barrage that Brawl Stars gave to her got to her, and along with the general meta shift that the new Lumi couldn't deal with. And she just became yet another brawler. Never exactly one of the worst, but a far cry from the best brawler in the game she once was, and she kind of lost her niche in the meta. Fittingly, number 8 is Draco, right after Lumi. Draco has one of the most interesting stories in this entire video. He started off completely weak before release, and was set to be one of those weak release brawlers like Willow. But of course, this couldn't happen. Brawl Stars buffed him to the moon, turning him into an S tier brawler on release. And then, well, he slowly fell off after that, getting a few nerfs here and there, and then the meta sort of shifted away from tanks and more into an anti-tank meta, which Draco was not good in at all. However, he made a huge comeback with his hypercharge, which on release may be a top 10 hypercharge of all time. It alone boosted him into the S tier, and at one point, a top 3 brawler in the game, with Lumi. And then the nerfs came. He got an utterly diabolical amount of nerfs, and funnily enough, he's now at the exact same spot as Lumi, in the C tier, less than a year after being in the top 3 brawlers in the game. At number 7, we have Rosa. On release, she was completely broken. Her super was broken with an increased duration and damage reduction, and combine this with the fact everyone had her, and well, she caused a whole apocalypse. However, she was then utterly destroyed over 3 straight balance changes, even requiring her own emergency nerfs. Funnily enough, she wasn't even F tier afterwards, but she was quite mediocre, hanging around the C and B tier for a while. But she got her big break, well, you know when. Her hypercharge brought her back to the top of the meta, having an insane slow that allowed her to catch anyone, which, well, as we all know, led to even more nerfs. However, this wasn't the only reason she fell off. She simply was just not equipped to deal with the new, more aggro meta. Her inability to face off against crowd control and her super becoming less and less valuable, as well as her lack of an approach tool, all combined to make her into a D tier brawler. At number 6, we got Clancy. He was released completely broken. It was ridiculously easy to actually charge a super, and his super dealt ridiculous damage, and his main attack damage was ridiculous. His movement speed was also ridiculous, and he was overall just a menace. He was made like Surge to melt tanks, but this version of Clancy melted everyone. And so this led to one of the biggest falloffs in history. Brawlstars eviscerated Clancy over several balance changes, murdering his speed, his damage, his super damage, and his super charge rate. Brawlstars kind of messed up on his balancing, nerfing his stage 1 mostly, which was quite balanced, making it almost completely unusable. Soon enough, Clancy fell all the way down to the F tier, and since then it's been pretty complicated, with a strong hyper being released for him and more recently some gigantic buffs, but it remains to be seen how he'll be balanced from now. At number 5, we got Kit. Kit might be one of the more interesting ones here. On release, he might have been a top 20 brawler of all time. His mechanics were balanced completely broken. For example, on release, he was completely immune to enemy damage while attached to an enemy. For obvious reasons, this was deviously broken. Of course, this wasn't all, as he dealt devious damage and had whimsical supercharge. All of this combined to make Kit the best brawler in the game on release. And then the nerfs came. These multiple nerfs combined to literally push Kit from the S tier all the way down to the F tier in a single update, which I'm not sure has ever happened in the history of Brawl Stars. After the nerfs, he was almost unplayably bad and was extremely weak. So weak, in fact, that he got big buffs and then one of the most broken hypercharges in the game. Overall, while he did have the largest single fall off, he isn't lower because he wasn't horrible or at least mediocre for a super long time. At number 4, we got Jessie. She's an interesting case. At one point, she was one of the best brawlers in the game. And what point was that? As we all know, during the hypercharge era. Her hyper was one of the best in the game when it dropped and for a while after. The sheer health it had, and the quick speed that it took for Jessie to charge it, made it a lethal weapon, and Jessie by extension. Interestingly, Jessie received 0 nerfs since then, so what could have caused her downfall? Well, the release of more hypercharges, and more importantly, damage inflation. The more damage brawlers dealt, the easier it was to take down her turret, which was the main reason she was even considered meta. Combine this with a severe lack of damage without her turret, and she slid down the meta, being the worst brawler in the game at one point. However, she's interesting in that she still is a noob stomper, having a niche against mid players in Heist and Hot Zone, but is completely useless at pro levels. Before we get into the top 3, let me mention some more honorable mentions. Stu, Pam, Piper, Bull, and Penny were all in consideration, but couldn't make the final cut. But with that, let's get into the top 3. At number 3, we have Hank. On release, he was actually broken. Not exactly in terms of stats, but in terms of bugs and mechanics. In Showdown, his power cube scaling was deviously broken, but that's just a side note. What was crazier was that he used to be able to hide in bushes and not show his attack. This made sneak attacks work incredibly well with Hank. Furthermore, he had multiple bugs, such as a super damage increase at close range and super charge rate. Finally, he could also heal automatically while charging a bubble. All of this combined him to make him utterly broken on release, and so he got big nerfs. Huge nerfs. They butchered his health, damaged and supercharged, removed some of his mechanics, and removed some of the bugs that had helped him. Soon enough, Hank dropped all the way down to the F tier, basically becoming useless. And so, he stayed in the D and F tier for months, being the worst brawler in the game in some patches, despite a multitude of buffs and reworks. And then he received his hypercharge, and became the single best brawler in the game. His hypercharge was incredibly broken, basically turning him into a guaranteed sniper with insane homing. A few more nerfs here and there, the introduction of buffies, and a general meta shift has caused Hank to slowly fall down since then, currently being at a mediocre C tier. Far from the best, but also far from the worst brawler in the game. At number 2, we got Mr. P. At one point in time, Mr. P was probably the best and definitely the most annoying brawler in the game. Before his hypercharge, Mr. P was among one of the worst brawlers in the game. He's the type of brawler that you do not want to be broken, so BrawlStars had nerfed him into the ground before his hypercharge, and he was languishing at the bottom. Unfortunately though, they released quite possibly the most annoyingly broken hypercharge for Mr. P. He made one of the biggest jumps we've ever seen, from the F tier straight to the S tier, with just how strong his hyper was. If you let him charge it, it was genuinely game over. Of course, because of this, he started to get nerfs. It took a while and a lot of gradual nerfs before he was finally utterly broken in the wrong way. With the increase in the aggro meta and the rise of broken spawners like Sirius, Mr. P has fell to one of the worst brawlers in the game and back to being in the F tier. Funnily enough, even before his hyper, Mr. P has been constantly at the top and bottom of the meta, as it's often so difficult to actually balance him properly without making him extremely annoying or extremely bad. Finally, at number 1, we have Edgar. This guy has one of the most interesting histories of any brawler. His release is probably the most famous of anyone in Brawl Stars history. Everyone had him, and he was broken. He had good health, good damage, and could heal with each shot, and could also charge it super quickly, which allowed him to fly literally anywhere. Some exaggeration, yes, but he was still an S tier brawler. Yet after a few seemingly mid-nerfs, he started to slide quickly down the meta. Why? Well, the health nerf was quite bad for Edgar, as the combo of his attack and healing and overall health was quite lethal, so it began the full slide down. However, the main reason came from the fact that people just started to learn how to play against him. On release, people didn't really know how he worked, so he was difficult to actually kill. However, with more reps against him, it was easy to see that he was countered by lots of brawlers. And as the amount of brawlers in the game increased, the more that countered Edgar increased, and the more he fell down the meta, being the worst brawler in the game for a while. And then, to no one's surprise, Edgar's hypercharge saved him. It was incredibly easy to charge up, especially since you could use his Let's Fly gadget to charge it faster. This led to him returning to the S tier for about 20 minutes. Of course, Edgar's hyper got nerfed, and the increase in overall aggressiveness, but also overall self-sufficiency and archetypes Edgar usually countered, led to Edgar eventually returning back to the F tier. He's in an especially tough position, as if he's too powerful, noobs will be complaining a lot, and if he's too weak, no one outside of noobs will be playing him. And with that, we're done. As always, make sure to put your own lists in the comments. Also, there was a lot of recency bias with this list, so a lot of falloffs that may have been years ago or even pre-2020 may have been missed. So let me know if there are any especially egregious ones. A big thank you to Hank Equals No Skill, also known as Angel, for helping me out with this video, and as always, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.